Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. This week, I'm really excited to have on the show Nicole Oliva. For a while now, I've been looking for someone who has a story to tell around Crohn's disease. We've had a lot of other conditions come on the show, but Crohn's is it's a really difficult disease, and the community is quite large. And so I really wanted to have someone come on and tell their story. And for those of you who don't know, Crohn's is a type of inflammatory bowel disease that can cause all kinds of horrible symptoms. Furthermore, upon your diagnosis, like a lot of chronic health issues, most people are given bleak, vague diagnoses that lead them to believe that their lives are over. And it's a real mental battle as much as it is a physical battle. Nicole is someone who really embodies the spirit of this podcast and why I set it up, in that she's been through a lot throughout her Crohn's journey, and she'll come on to tell that story, but has come out on the other side and is actually using her story now to help others. And if you check out her Instagram, Wellness with Crohn's, where she consistently puts out authentic and caring messages out to a community that is in such need of this positivity. So I'm really happy and excited she agreed to come on to the show and share her story. How's it going?
Good. How about you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks. Really good. So just kind of like taking it back really to previous to you getting sick and any sort of symptoms. Could you talk us through like how life was like then, and then maybe lead us into the story of kind of like your first symptoms and how you came to be diagnosed?
Yeah. So before I was diagnosed, I was just 16 years old. And that's when I started noticing like little symptoms. But life before that, I kind of ate whatever I wanted, did whatever I wanted. At like 16 and like obviously like teenage years, you don't really pay much attention to what you're eating. You don't really care because you're young and just do whatever. I mean, your health is like the last thing you care about, to be honest. At least in my personal experience. But leading up to that, I slowly started getting these like severe, sharp, like gut-wrenching pains. And it almost felt like, for me personally, like I was like kind of digesting knives. It was just that painful. And I just remember like I would have coffee. Like coffee was the one thing like I noticed right away. Probably like a year before I was diagnosed. I was like 16, but I was diagnosed at 17, and coffee was the one thing I noticed like would kill my stomach. I was like, I don't know what's going on. I used to drink coffee all the time and it never bothered me. And then all of a sudden, like that hurt, like it killed me. And then over time, it got worse. I started getting like 102 fevers, losing weight rapidly was like a big thing for me. And I remember one time I was in high school, and I remember just feeling so sick. Like I wanted to just fall asleep. So I remember telling my mom, having the conversation, like, "Mom, I don't feel good." And she's like, "No, it's just cramps. Like, don't worry." And I'm like, "No, this is not just like stomach cramps from like eating something. It didn't set well. Like this was worse." So I wound up going to my pediatrician at the time, and they did like the whole like little like press stomach exam, and I was telling her my symptoms, and that's when they sent me to a gastroenterologist. So then when I met up with the gastroenterologist, they made me do an endoscopy and colonoscopy, which is ultimately what gave them the outcome that I had Crohn's, because they were able to see like what my intestines look like. I had ulcers at the time too, so I think having Crohn's created ulcers. So I had that on top of Crohn's disease. And yeah, those were like pretty much the symptoms, like rapid weight loss, frequent like bathroom usage, fevers, severe pain all the time.
Were you sick? Were you 16 at this time when it first started happening?
Yeah, that's when I first noticed, like when I would drink coffee is when it started bothering me. So I was 16 around then. But then I was diagnosed right before my 17th birthday. So like within the matter of like those like 10 to 12 months is when I like started noticing like the weight loss and the fatigue, the just like the fact that I felt sick all the time, like I felt like I had the flu almost, like my body was just trying to fight something. And I would like sweat a lot because I think my body was obviously trying to make up for the fact that it was fighting off this disease.
Mm. It's I didn't realise that you with Crohn's you got like a fever and you got those kind of symptoms as well. I thought it was all kind of in your stomach. I didn't realise that. Wow.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's it I know like a lot of chronic illnesses, they like affect your whole body in ways like you wouldn't expect. Like you just think like Crohn's is directly in the stomach, but that's not always the case. Like it could take different forms. Like I've had so many other symptoms, like after my initial diagnosis that like you would never even think of.
yeah. Wow. So you're 17. You get this diagnosis. I mean, I'm trying to think back to what I was like as a 17-year-old, and I would not have been able to. I mean, I was an immature 17-year-old, so hopefully you were more mature than I was. But how were you able to deal with that mentally at that stage? And like, what was the plan of action with the doctor? And did you do your own research? Could you give some more detail about that?
Yeah, so at 17 years old, I mean, I was always kind of mature for my age. But again, I didn't really take my health all that seriously. I didn't really think it was like it was important, but just I didn't take it seriously. So when I found out my diagnosis, I was kind of like, okay, like this is what I have. Great. I was kind of relieved. Um, I wasn't upset or anything like that because I felt more relief. Like, okay, now I know what it is. Now we can get it under control, kind of thing. And I know other people obviously like, when they're diagnosed have the complete opposite, but I think it's just the relief that, okay, like I didn't realize how painful it was going to be later on by not taking it seriously, but I just thought, okay, now we could take action. Like we could just get this under control. And honestly, I didn't think it was all that serious. Like I knew it was a disease, but I didn't take it seriously at all.
Yeah.
I did do research, and I obviously like learned about the disease, and I remember having to research medications that I would have to start taking to get me into remission and not flare anymore. Um, that's like probably the most research I did at that age was on the medications. I remember not wanting to do injections or infusions. So I remember like deciding on, I forgot the full name, but in short, it's called 6MP, and it was just a tablet. And me being a typical 17-year-old girl, I would forget to take it very often, and then I would just not take it at all.
Yeah.
So um, my plan of action was very weak. Careless, say
Yeah.
the least. So
I guess the beauty of being a 17-year-old, and it was one of my previous guests who had a diagnosis when they were young, and they said it almost gave them kind of a bit of a fearlessness to it. And so maybe because they hadn't had so many things happen to them in their life at that point, and their life wasn't that serious, it was easier for them maybe to kind of be like that. But then I guess, yeah, you are a little bit careless when you're 17. It's interesting what you said about I didn't take my health seriously at that age. Well, I didn't take my health seriously until God, probably till I was 28. And I think there's probably people in their 50s and 60s now who don't take their health seriously. I guess unfortunately it's until you reach a point where there's something wrong, then quite often that's the point when you take it seriously.
I feel like when you lose your health is when you take it seriously,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. So talk us through the next like couple of years. Like how did you respond to whatever treatment you had, and could you talk us through that story a little bit?
Yeah, so I was taking 6MP from when was this? I was diagnosed in 2014, so I was almost 17 years old. And from there on, I was taking 6MP until I want to say like 2016, and then I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna just do natural route. Like maybe my diet is going to solve this or
Mm.
make me feel better. So I'm like, I don't want to take medicine anymore. I don't want the side effects. I don't want any of that. So I did the natural route, or just eating a well balanced diet, which in reality it probably wasn't well balanced, but that only led to it just getting progressively worse because I wasn't taking the medicine. So my body was still not in remission. Um, and I still had the pain. Um, there was parts though where I was completely fine, like symptom free. It would only be like a few months and then the symptoms would flare up again. But it got to the point where I started losing rapid weight again, fevers. Just because I stopped taking the medicine, I just said, whatever, I don't want to take this. I don't want the side effects. I don't want cancer or the long list of side effects that always come with any medicine, even though it's like a small percentage. So I kind of just said, you know what, do it this way. And let's see what happens. And it just got worse. I stopped going to the doctor, the gastroenterologist as well, which was a big mistake on my part because I kind of just didn't want to be told that I had to take medicine. So kind of just thought I knew what I was doing, just being stubborn. Um, and around 2017 is when I started noticing rapid weight loss, like severe rapid weight loss. I went from, I don't care about talking about weight personally, but I was like 140 something pounds. And by the day of my surgery, because it got that bad, I needed surgery, I was 103 pounds. So, and that was all within a year.
Wow.
So I lost like over 40 pounds in a year.
Wow.
So rapid weight loss, I had this symptom too called erythema nodosum. It's pretty much just like these welts on your leg, raised inflamed welts. And it got so bad that I couldn't walk because my ankles would be all swollen. There was times I needed to be like wheeled in a wheelchair or just like take it easy and like stay off my feet, which was hard to do because at the time I was a cashier at a craft store. So I needed to be on my feet. And then I became a waitress. So I was always on my feet. And I would need to be put on steroids for the erythema nodosum for it to like calm down and go away. I believe I was on prednisone at the time. And that in itself just caused all other symptoms, but it did help the erythema nodosum and that went away. But yeah, so rapid weight loss, I was constantly dealing with, I don't know if anyone else has ever experienced this, I guess, during a flare with Crohn's, but like frequent what I thought were UTIs, but they were actually caused by the abscess that I had in my intestines that I later found out a few months later was causing them. So yeah, flu symptoms again, like severe sick. Always at night, I would have these night sweats, like to the point where I'd wake up, and it sounds kind of gross, but I'd wake up and my clothes would be soaking wet, almost like I jumped in a pool or something. That's how much my body was fighting the disease and fighting this flare because it just got so bad. So over time, I'm not gonna lie, like I hope this isn't triggering to anyone who is listening, but I have like body dysmorphia, so being on the heavier side at a younger age, I think I enjoyed seeing myself lose weight without having to put in any effort. So I think that's what hindered me getting the help when I definitely needed it. I kept putting it off. Like everyone's telling me, you need to go to the doctor. We need to find you a new doctor. Because at that time, like I no longer had to see a pediatric gastroenterologist. I need to find an adult one. So I just kept saying, nah, like I'm fine. Meanwhile, I was at the point where I could barely walk. And my life wasn't being lived to the fullest because I was in pain and just feeling sick all the time. So yeah, so finally I caved, and I saw a doctor, and he's like, this is serious. Like you could just see how sick I was just from my skin, how skinny I was. I just looked like my body was trying to fight this. So yeah, so he sent me for an MRI. We didn't have to do a colonoscopy or anything. Actually, did we? We did one later on, not anywhere when I first met him. But he did an MRI and he could see how bad the inflammation was just from the MRI. That the minute he called me, so the day he got the results, the next day I had an emergency procedure to get like a drainage tube put in because we found out I had an abscess. And an abscess is like a pus-filled, I guess like ulcer inside your stomach, and it was like spilling out. So I needed a drainage bag for that. So I had like a little hole in my stomach in this all happened in 2018 when I finally got help. So 2018, I still had the little like incision mark, tiny incision, painless getting it, but afterwards it was probably the worst pain ever. Um, and a little tube and a bag that I'd have to change for from May till July. I had that bag, and it was like the hot summer months, so it was just like annoying. But the only good thing is at the time I could wear dresses and flowy dresses to like hide it better than if it was in the winter, like wearing pants with it. I don't know how I would have done that because of where it was located. Like I feel like pants would have put pressure on the insertion.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I had the drainage tube put in, and hours following that, I fainted because the pain was unbearable, and I lost a lot of blood after that procedure because I'm anemic as well, which is very common when you have Crohn's disease. Um, so I had to get two blood transfusions following that procedure. So I was in the hospital. It's supposed to be an in and out procedure, but I was in the hospital for 2 days.
Mm.
Um, and it just like progressively got worse. I don't know like how far I should get into it because I feel like I'm just going on.
No. Just no, it's you've been through a lot. Yeah, and it's just kind of it's just a crazy story to hear. And thank you so much for telling it. What age were you when you were going through this particular part of the story?
I was 20 years old, but it was like close to when I was 21. So it started when I was 20, like when I started noticing like the rapid weight loss and all that stuff. And then I finally, in April of 2018, met with my doctor. And in May of 2018 is when we started the first procedure, which was the drainage tube.
Mhm.
So I turned 21 while still having the drainage tube and a month before my like major um, surgery.
Yeah, and up until the point where you started noticing your rapid weight loss, so kind of 16 or maybe 17 when you got the diagnosis to that point, were the symptoms pretty severe on like 24/7, or is it something that just kind of like came in like fits and starts?
Um, so when I was 17, they weren't as bad. I mean, after I'd eat a lot of meals, I did notice I'd be in severe pain. And at night too. I know when I'm flaring, when at night I have a hard time sleeping
Yeah.
because of the pain. That's usually when it's the worst is at night for me.
Mm.
But when I was older, it was like 24/7. Every symptom was just horrible. So right before like all my surgeries is when it was the worst, and it was like constant. It wasn't like here and there kind of pains or symptoms. When I was first diagnosed, it was every once in a while, mostly at night or after meals. But as it progressively got worse as the years went on, that's when I noticed the symptoms were really, really bad
And
and constant.
And how did you? So obviously, this is all, and we'll get beyond that major surgery that you're having at that point. We'll talk about what happened after that. But mentally, you're going through this phase of where you're growing into an adult, and it's always quite like an interesting phase of someone's life. It was for myself, but you're as carefree as you can be at that age, and for you, you're having to grow up real fast, and you're having to deal with problems that no one else at your age is, and also probably you've got friends who at that age, whilst maybe understanding, they don't have the life experience maybe to deal with that as well. So how did you deal with it mentally? How did it affect like your relationships at that age, and you just to be able to be like a young person, how did it affect that?
So at 17, I was always very quiet. So I only had like a small circle of friends in high school, always the very quiet girl. But I never was one to party or drink a lot or anything like that, or do any sort of drugs, nothing like that. So on that end, like I didn't have to worry about um, like changing habits or acting a certain way. But it was very hard because I feel like at 17 years old, none of my friends really even knew what Crohn's disease was.
Mm.
Um, and like the understanding level was very slim to none. I mean, my friends were very, very caring and kind and like would be there in a heartbeat for me. But again, like no one else had to go through it. No one knows what it's like to have a chronic illness until you have one and you're actually going through it. I mean, people could be empathetic and kind and caring and understanding, but it does get a little frustrating when, you know, you kind of have to cancel plans because it's acting up and people don't understand. They think you're just flaking or something like that. Like it's very, very hard to, I guess, navigate that, especially at like 17 years old.
Mm.
Um, I actually skipped out on my junior prom because that was the year I was diagnosed and I just like did not want to go. I mean, I kind of used my Crohn's disease as an excuse not to go, but it did like kind of prohibit me from going to social events at the time because I was just dealing with a lot. And although I didn't take it seriously at the time, I was still dealing with like the symptoms and the pain, and I just like couldn't be bothered to go dress shopping or worry about like what my friends were doing or who's limo, like little things like that, like that my friends would be complaining about, just like dresses and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, like you only knew like what I have to deal with kind of thing. So at that age, like it was very hard for people to understand. But I think now being almost 24, um, there's a lot more understanding that comes with it. Like I think it comes with age. And a lot more research. I feel like a lot more people as well are being diagnosed with Crohn's
Mm.
or colitis or any sort of like IBD. Or even just any chronic illness. I've met so many people that are like recently diagnosed with a chronic illness.
Mm.
But yeah, I feel like there's more understanding because more information is coming out.
Yeah.
But mentally, later on, leading up to my like surgery in 2018, I was not in a good spot mentally at all.
Yeah.
Um, and being 21, like I turned 21 while all of this was happening. So everyone likes 21st birthday, you want to go out drinking with your friends and like have a good time. And I'm not gonna lie, like I was very depressed, very jealous and almost like resentful of people that got to enjoy their 21st birthday.
Mm.
Now I look back in it and I'm not, but at the time I was like seeing everyone on social media like enjoying their 21st birthday. And I was just like, oh, you're so lucky. Like, why do I have to be sitting home depressed on the couch with a drainage bag and a tube that's causing me so much pain all the time? While you were going out like having fun, like why can't I have the normal 21st birthday experience, or why can't I just have a normal life for an early 20 something year old woman?
Mm.
So there was a lot of resentment and uh, jealousy, I think, that went on with it, and I kind of just let the depression take over because I honestly like had no quality of life at that time. In June, like April, May, June, I really had no quality of life leading up to my surgery in July. Just depressed on the couch, didn't move. Like my mom, like she would go to work and come home and I'd be in the same exact spot, crying all the time, just like not in a good mental spot. Because I think that's when I realized like I really like messed up by not taking this seriously years ago. So I think there was also like a lot of forgiveness I had to do for myself because at a young age you don't understand. But yeah, I just was not in a good place as the disease like progressed back in 2018. I was very suicidal. And it got worse until the disease got better. And that's when I slowly started to I guess heal and come to terms with myself and like all the past mistakes I made because I was a young kid.
Mm.
But yeah, it just mentally it does take a toll. I don't think anyone realizes until they go through a chronic illness or a health condition or any health issue until they go through it they won't understand.
We'll go back to the mental side of things in a while, but so you were. Let's just talk. Yeah, if you could take us through the rest of the story to kind of where you're at today. So you had this major surgery. Could you talk us through from there until kind of up to today, really?
Yeah, so I had it's called an ileocecal resection. It was part of the small intestine that got removed. Um, so following that point, like my disease just got progressively better because it took out the disease, like I still have Crohn's disease, but it took out the severely flared portion of it, which ultimately put me in remission.
Mm.
But there were a lot of complications following surgery that I ended up going to the hospital about 3 more times after leaving. So it was a surgery where I stayed for a week, and I couldn't leave until I made a bowel movement, because I need to make sure my digestive system was awake and working properly, and I could, pass stool and all of that. So about 2 weeks after, uh, I started noticing I had blood when I went to the bathroom, and I got nervous. So I called the doctor, and they made me go to the emergency room again. And they kept me for like another week and a half, like checking my blood levels and um, seeing if I was losing a lot of blood, which I was. So I had to get another blood transfusion. And at the time, I actually forgot to mention another symptom I had, because I had a fistula, which is like a tunnel between 2 organs that is not supposed to be there. So I had one from my small intestine leading into my psoas muscle. So I had like digestive fluids like running into a psoas muscle. So it made it hard for me to lift up my right leg. That's another reason why I had trouble walking. I would be limping around all the time. But yeah, so I had that, which also led to a blood clot. And blood clots are not common for someone my age. That's, it usually happens in older people. So I had a blood clot as well. So I was on blood thinners. And what they think following my surgery is that the blood thinners didn't give my body time to heal following the surgery. And that's why I was losing a lot of blood when I went to the bathroom. So they monitored that. Everything was dandy. Everything was fine. Another like week or so goes by, and I go back and found out I'm impacted. I couldn't go to the bathroom at all, which is also very common after a surgery like I had. So I'm not gonna get into details with that, but I kind of just had to manually get relief from, nurses and stuff. They had to help and do an enema and stuff like that. And then after that, everything just kind of went uphill, and I got better. I gained weight, like healthy weight back. I was living normal life for the most part. I actually started Humira the month after my surgery. And Humira is a biologic that I self-inject every other week. And since then, I've been in remission. So I'm very grateful for that. And I think because of what I've been through, it did make me stronger minded, more resilient. Following that, I did have my ups and downs, like any normal person, going through what I had. But yeah, so from there on, I kind of just got better. I started working out, taking my health seriously, like working out, eating healthy. And then leading up to now, the only problem I do have or did have, I was diagnosed with SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And SIBO could also be caused from a surgery. So I got treatment for that in January, and I really haven't had symptoms at all within the last few months, thankfully. But yeah, that's like severe bloating and fatigue, bad breath, brain fog, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I haven't had any of those symptoms since my treatment, so hopefully that sticks. But that's like the only complication I've had since 2018, which I'm very grateful.
And are you still taking medication at the moment?
Yes. So from 2018, I've been taking Humira, and I haven't changed that because it's been working for me. It's kept me in remission.
Yeah.
I actually found out I was in remission, I want to say a year later. So September 2019 is when I found out I was in remission, which was a very happy time. But yeah, I've been taking Humira every other week and just self-injecting it. And so far, so good. And hopefully it stays that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm taking my medication seriously this time around.
It's interesting, Crohn's disease, because quite often, and as was the case with me, with chronic illnesses, people try to they get their first thing is to take medication, and then it actually creates more problems for them because it's not actually getting to the root cause of why they're sick. Whereas with Crohn's, it doesn't seem that way, because I've spoken to someone else recently who is now in remission because, you know, he took the medication and went down that route. But also, whilst you can't just take the medication and just live, you know, a reckless life, you have to, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, you have to also now, you know, I guess eat in a certain way. Do you take any supplements or anything like that?
So I'm always low on vitamin D, so I'm always taking vitamin D. I take magnesium. I actually get iron infusions because I'm anemic. Iron tablets do not sit well with my stomach. I constantly just unfortunately throw them up. They just don't sit well. So I've been doing infusions, which helps a ton with my fatigue and just like when I used to stand up, everything would black out. But yeah, that's like one of the biggest supplements, I guess you could say, is the IV infusion, the IV iron infusion. But besides that, I don't really take too many supplements because I always like to check with my doctor first, because health is like bio individual, so I don't want to just go with what the crowd is doing. I always like to make sure that it's gonna help me and my body, and I don't want to take too much, because too much of anything, even if it's like a supplement or good for you, is never good in the long run. But yeah, so when I took medicine, it did solve a lot of my problems. I think my surgery plus the medicine is what put me into remission. Like you said, though, like for other diseases, it doesn't always work that way. And luckily for me, I found a medication that works. I know other people that have like colitis or Crohn's, it doesn't always work that way. I know sometimes they have to try a bunch of different medications to find out which works best for them.
Yeah.
But luckily I guess you could call it my first try, because I never really took the first medication. It works for me, so I'm very grateful for that.
Awesome. And so let's go back to the mental side of things, because this is, you know, anyone listening to this who's going through different things, it's still the same mental battle. Like, although we have, you know, you and I have had very, very different things physically that we've had to deal with, I imagine mentally, you know, we've been in similar places. Sounds like, you know, with, you know, suicidal thoughts, maybe, you know, that's incredibly extreme. It must have been so difficult for you. And how did you, and I know you got to the surgery and then, you know, that turned things around for you, but there was still a long period of time in between that surgery and, you know, previous to that, where you had to get through the dark days. How did you do that at that stage, where like how did you talk yourself round and try to be more positive, or was that not possible at times?
So I think it came a lot from my loved ones. I think having that support system is what helped me, because if I didn't have that support system, I don't know if I'd be here, to be honest. Having people that loved me and cared for me and would try to take me out of the house and get me to do fun things, or just like, I don't know, keep me busy. I had really great friends at the time. I'm still obviously friends with today, but they'd come over my house and they'd bring things for us to do together. Like both of my friends at the time actually like brought over like adult coloring books and like movies and just like fun things that we could do together that would take my mind off of it. So I think having that support system is really what helped me throughout that. But I also, so I'm a very spiritual person. I'm not religious, but I think having that spirituality, and like that's when I actually became spiritual, is like the positive thinking and law of attraction and like manifestation and all that stuff. I think it definitely happened during that time period, because I put my faith into the fact that, okay, I'm going through a hard time now. And it's hard when you're like suicidal and going through that deep, dark depression to even think this way. So it took a lot of self-help and like watching YouTube videos on other people and like what they were going through, and having that positive outlook. Like, this person went through like hell, but they came out stronger than ever.
Yeah.
So I think it was kind of just like I was trying to, in my head, envision myself like at the happiest, like, and healthiest I could possibly be. And it turned out like that's pretty much how it happened.
Mm.
For before surgery, I was told I was gonna have like an open surgery, not like minimal invasive, like full, like from sternum down to like pelvis kind of open surgery, because that's how bad it was. I don't, it could just be sheer luck, but I pictured myself not having to have that happen and having like minimally invasive surgery. And when I woke up from surgery, they told me they were, by some surprise, able to do that. Whether whatever belief system I had did that, I don't know. But I think just positively thinking like I was going to come out of this slightly scarred but stronger. I
Mm.
think that mindset, although it was very hard a lot of days, like I won't say it was easy. A lot of days I just kind of sat on the couch and cried. Just literally didn't want to live anymore. So I know if anyone who is listening is going through that or doesn't have that support system, just know that you can get out of this. You can get better. It seems like dark days will never end, but there is always light at the end of the tunnel. Like I'm proof of that. I know many others are. I know when you're going through it, that's like the last thing you're thinking of. But I kind of wish I had a podcast like this at the time to listen to and listen to other people's stories, because it did help me a lot. It would have helped me a lot too. So I think knowing you're not alone, because even though I'm in remission, like I still have my dark days. I still have those thinking patterns occasionally. It happens, but just knowing that you're strong and you can get through this is, I think, the mindset that is hard to get to, but it's the mindset that will ultimately get you out of that funk and that way of thinking.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Because it's almost yeah, and you said so many good things there. First of all, just like for me, it's almost thinking like when I get through this, I will have how strong I will be compared to the normal person on the street is just unbelievable. And if I could just find the strength to do that and to become a better, healthier, better person, then it's just going to be so much more positive than it ever would have been before. And you know, you're living proof of that. Um, and yeah, I really like that you brought up the spiritual side of things, and it's something that just tends to come up almost every episode naturally. Sometimes I ask people about it just because you know, I've gone from being, and I'm not Mr. Spiritual or anything like that, but I've gone from being so not spiritual to someone who is constantly looking for, looking in, visualization is something I fully believe in, law of attraction. I fully believe that you would have had an impact on that surgery. And I do think that anyone listening to this, it's really important that, like, if they're not considering that side of things and they are suffering right now, what have you got to lose? You might as well. And if you're just only addressing the physical, you're going to waste. You could solve it, but you're going to waste some time. Well, in my opinion, you're going to waste some time. I wasted a lot of time only focusing on the physical, and so I'm really glad you mentioned that. And do you feel now you're kind of, on the other side of it, that's just left you in a really, mentally strong position because you do have this more spiritual outlook on life?
Oh, 100%. I feel like having that spiritual outlook has made me stronger. Like, to be honest, I could be going through any hardship in my life. And I look back to where I was in 2018 and like how I wanted to like take my own life, um and how unhealthy I was and how I had like zero quality of life. And I look to now, it's like, okay, like that was the worst possible time in my life. I got through that. That means I could get through pretty much anything following that. So
Yeah.
I think that's how I look at it now. I kind of use that as like a drive or a force to get through like hard times. So yeah, so I think it definitely has made me a stronger person in that sense. Like I think I could get through anything now after going through that.
Good. And you did touch upon it before, but I want to go back to it. And it sounded like you were almost giving someone advice earlier, which is a question I like to ask people. So, I mean, someone who is going through, what you went through in your darkest times, what's your advice to them, like more mentally than like practically, I guess, just because, as you say, we're all bio individuals. So more from a mental point of view, what's your advice to them?
I think one of my biggest takeaways is having that support. And if you don't have the support from family members or loved ones, what helped me is I joined like a bunch of Facebook groups that were also going through what I was going through, and like support groups and stuff like that. Like, even if it's not coming from loved ones, I think having that support, even from like complete strangers, they're very kind in those groups and very helpful. You could ask questions and they would respond. So I think any sort of support group is something like mentally that helped me a ton, is knowing I'm not alone. Because I think a lot of the times when we're going through something negative, we get in our own head and we only think about the negatives. So I think knowing you're not alone and knowing there's someone out there going through it, or who has gone through it but has gotten better or gotten out of it, is like one of the things that helped me a lot when I was going through it mentally. Because again, like, even if you have loved ones, they don't know what it's like still. Like, they're trying their best to understand. Like, my family members, amazing, but they also don't know what it's like to have a chronic illness. Some of my family members have like diabetes and stuff like that. So like, of course, they were more like understanding. But I think the main takeaway is like getting the support from people who are going through what you're going through, because I feel like you're going to feel the most understood and accepted. So that definitely helped my mental state, is having people that I could talk to that understood. And yeah, I feel like that's my main takeaway. But beyond the physical, like, just take your health seriously, because that's like another thing for me. Take it seriously.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think just going back to the support group, I think it's really important that, because those Facebook groups, I talk about it quite a lot. Those Facebook groups can be really positive, but then they could also be really negative. I guess I think you were talking about more people who can lift you up as opposed to
knock you down.
Yeah, and they don't mean to. These people are in dark places, and they're just, they just need a place to vent, and that's why. That's why I created the podcast. And this isn't me plugging it and say people should only listen to this, but there are so many stories out there of people recovering and people doing amazing things with their life. And I was, you mentioned it a few times about kind of exposing yourself to people who've been through it. And there is an actual Facebook group in the Lyme community called Lyme Disease Success Stories. And I just thought that was just such an amazing group, because there's people in there who have recovered, who can give advice to people, and it's just, you've got evidence there of people recovering. And I guess I would rather Facebook be more like that, rather than just a load of sick people kind of complaining and also maybe bringing each other down slightly. Because I think there was something, I read something, so I'm doing a lot of work with like Joe Dispenza at the moment. I need to stop mentioning him all the time, because I'm going to be sounding like a broken record. But I read something he wrote, and it was, and I already knew it, but it was like, if there's something that you perceive to be like unattainable, but then you see that someone else has achieved it, then suddenly then you see someone else has achieved it, it suddenly then just becomes so much more possible. And that's why exposing yourself to these kinds of stories, hopefully there's someone now listening to, in the depths of, not hopefully, but hopefully someone with Crohn's, is gaining real strength from your story, and believing now that it is possible. So yeah, I mean, the people that, in your support group within Facebook, the people you were speaking to, were you able to speak to people who had gotten themselves, into remission?
Yeah, so I actually I joined a few. Some were like more on the, like you said, like complaining side, I guess. So I kind of tried to avoid those, because I feel like it only made me feel worse.
Yeah.
But there was one, I forgot the name of it now, but there was one that talked about like success stories and like these people like, I've gone through the surgery, like you're gonna feel a lot better afterwards. And just like saying their stories of how after surgery they got into remission and their medication helped and all these things, which made me also like just like visualizing and stuff, picturing that, okay, if this person can do it, why can't me and my body do it? And ultimately that's what happened. But I think having like the success stories is what lifts you up, because you don't want to be, not that you don't want to be around them, but like people that are always like complaining and moping and kind of just bringing you down to their level. I feel like in a way that kind of just makes you feel worse and like even more sorry for yourself, even though you're allowed to be, because I definitely was. I think having people that lift you up is is most important at a time like that.
Definitely. And then finally, could you just name like a few areas of your life that, how different is your life now compared to how it would have been had you not been sick? And I'm talking more of the, the positive ways. Like, what can you look back on now and think, wow, that would never have happened? Even just elements of your personality or, specific things that have happened to you.
So like in terms of elements of my personality, I feel like I've been a little more open and vulnerable. So that's something I always used to be very closed off. And lately, as the years like go on since my surgery, I feel like I've been more vulnerable and willing to share my story and talk about this. That's the main reason I made my Instagram account, was to spread awareness. I think strength and resilience is like one of the biggest things that came from this. Knowing, like I said earlier, that you could, if I was able to get through that, I know now in the future I could get through anything. Because I have that strength and resilience that took me from the darkest place to now a light at the end of the tunnel. In terms of other things, I would say that my life isn't as much different as I think one would expect, because like I said, like I didn't party or drink a lot. Like I'll have a few drinks here and there, but it's nothing crazy. I've always been more of a homebody, more introverted. But I do think that going through what I went through, it did give me a greater appreciation for life. Something that not that I didn't care about, but something I didn't think twice about. Is a better way of putting it. I didn't think twice about life at all, like, and how easily it could be taken for granted and taken away from you. And the same thing goes for health. Like I didn't realize any of it until I went through it. And now I have a greater appreciation for my health, for life, for my body, and like how it fought for me. I think there's a lot more self-love and self-forgiveness too that came from, like positively came from it, is like forgiving myself for not taking it seriously. But now I learned from that and now I'm taking it seriously and eating a more well-balanced diet. I do still struggle with like body image issues, which it's going to happen. But I think that having that well-balanced diet and doing exercising, I try to keep it low impact. I used to go like hard on like high impact, high intensity, like HIIT or weightlifting. And there's nothing wrong with that. If it works for your body, it works for your body. But for me, I noticed like with my stomach issues, I think like low impact movement too is something that like I fell in love with because of this, which is, I don't know if I would have done it previously. So like Pilates, yoga, I think learning to be more mindful too, and kind of like if I'm thinking negatively about a situation, I kind of try to be in the present moment and kind of just appreciate what's going on right now, which is something I gained from that as well. Instead of sitting in like wallowing in all the negatives, just say like, hey, okay, what is one good thing? Like gratitude. What is one good thing that I could take away from today or this moment, instead of just sulking in it? So I think gratitude and strength and resilience and all that stuff is a positive that came out of it.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot. I think you'll probably be surprised that it'd be really interesting, maybe in a few more years as well, if you could see like a sliding doors moment of where your life would have gone, because the most subtle changes can, create a completely different, even just, as you said, being more vulnerable, being more open. Just quickly at the like if people wanted to get in contact with you, you've got an Instagram. Could you just give a bit detail about the Instagram actually, and kind of why you started that app, and the kind of I know you don't necessarily have a vision for it, but if you did, what would that be?
So yeah, if anyone wanted to contact me, my Instagram is wellness with Crohn's. Um, so yeah, so I mainly started it to spread awareness about Crohn's and just like mental health. I'm a big mental health advocate, mainly because of how I was feeling at the time and because I'm currently like in therapy. I didn't go to therapy prior to um, my surgery or anything like that, and I kind of wish I started it back then, but it's definitely something that I advocate for because I feel like it has helped me a lot. And I know not everyone is unfortunately like lucky enough to have that, but yeah, so I talk about mental health. I'll bring awareness to Crohn's disease, but pretty much the main reason I made the account is to spread the word and make people feel less alone. I think like you made this podcast to bring awareness to chronic illnesses, and people who are listening who may be going through a hard time can listen to this and see that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or they're not alone. And I think I've had people reach out to me in my messages on Instagram like, thank you, like you're kind of speaking for me because um I'm going through a hard time right now and you're giving me hope. And that to me, like that makes me feel so good because that's the main reason I started it. Um, it also, I guess another positive thing that came out of this whole situation was I want to be in the health fields, health and psychology field. So I feel like I wouldn't have gone in that direction without going through this to promote health and to promote taking care of your body, both mentally, physically, emotionally, all of that. But yeah, that's mainly what I touch on my account. Is big advocate for mental health, Crohn's disease, um, what I kind of learned in therapy about myself, kind of just share that. And I'm not trying to be positive all the time. I'm not going to lie. Like I will tell people if I'm having a bad day, mainly because I feel like always pretending you're positive and having a good day isn't authentic.
Yeah.
And I think it makes people feel less alone when they know they're not just having a bad day, that someone who has, I guess, an account like I do and that is sharing, they're also struggling, makes people feel less alone. Yeah. So I think that's like the main takeaway from me making the account. And if it were to turn into something bigger or grander because of me spreading awareness, like that obviously would mean so much to me. I never once in a million years thought it would even grow as much as it did in the last few months, but I am very grateful and grateful for all the people that reach out and tell me like I'm helping them in some way, shape, or form. So
yeah, and for the record, anyone who's positive all of the time, it's just not possible. Yeah, I think it's just having that balance, isn't it? Like not being negative all the time, not being positive all the time. But yeah, no, I've checked out your Instagram. It's incredibly authentic and yeah, really meaningful. So yeah, please do go and check that out. I'll include your handle in the show notes. But yeah, for now, thank you very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. And yeah, I'm sure so many people will get a lot from your message and your story.
Thank you so much for having me. This is honestly like, I think the most important thing in my journey was sharing it, and getting the opportunity to do this means a lot.